When the toaster first came into existence, the browning and warming of bread was not done only to please the palate, but also for preservation. Bread just lasted longer when it was toasted. But today, the toaster provides so much more than a better breakfast. In the early years, toasters had many different looks, from an apparatus that you put in or near the fire, to a burner-boosted browning method, to the pop-up toaster and more.
This is what the first electric toaster looked like.
Where does the bread go?
The bread just lays in either side. This is the estate toaster that came out in 1925. People nowadays refer to it as a swinger, but it's really cool because it's one of the earliest 4-slice toasters. And the toast goes in each of these little
slide
slots.
in each one.
And watch what happens.
Oh my, wow, it is a swinger. It's great.
It kind of does a little toaster ballet.
Wait, do that again. Now do it again. One more time. I love it.
It's very cool.
Sounds like it's time for 60 Minutes. But it's not. It's Sunday morning. Have a piece of toast. We're off to the Toaster Collectors Convention. They call it Oktoberfest.
Whoever thought toasters would go this far?
A lot of people, you collect what?
There's some beautiful craftsmanship in some of them toasters.
I call them monuments to the breakfast table, basically.
This toaster right here would really clean up nicely.
Ken Huggins is a major collector. This is just part of his agglomeration. Who knew toasters could look so good?
This is the first American-produced toaster. We call it a Percher. It's a General Electric.
Many are antiques dating from the dawn of electric toasting, around 1908.
And while this thing is glowing red hot, you have to pick the piece of bread up and turn it over the other way, which could be disastrous.
There must be a trick to it.
There's got to be a trick to it. You have to be fast.
From perchers to pinchers.
One of the ideas that was really a breakthrough in toasters was being able to turn a piece of toast over.
To floppers and swingers.
Put the toast in the basket and turn the crank. And as a result, it turns itself to the other side.
The toaster mirroring the cultural and design history of the 20th century.
And with the advent of interest in club sandwiches, you begin to see a toaster that would toast 3 slices of bread.
The quest to build a better toaster attracted some of our greatest minds, like the guy who invented the light bulb.
These are basically the items that Edison made, called Etacraft, and they're very extremely well-made, very durable sorts of things.
And when sliced bread was invented in the 20s, toast took off, popping up, dropping down, and spilling out the sides.
It just kicks out on the side.
Toasters came into the modern age and offered a glimpse of the toast of tomorrow.
This is a Magamix. It's an infrared toaster. Just in case you're going on a trip, this is a travel toaster. And so you plug this into your cigarette lighter. We have a toaster that has an FM radio in it.
To house his entire collection of more than 1,100 toasters, Ken had to construct an outbuilding. More toasters.
Yeah.
Are you trying to cut back?
Yes. You can accumulate things you don't need if you're not careful.
But it's not working, is it?
No.
Cutting back.
No, not real well.
You look at them as artwork?
Absolutely.
Art that makes breakfast. Try asking Mona Lisa to get off her butt for the first time in 500 years and make you a piece of toast.
If I activate the toaster by pushing the lever down with a high-tech insulated poking device, you'll see the bread lifters fall and the heating elements glow. But the toaster barely runs before shutting off. Why is that? Well, the reason the heating elements are so different on the sides versus the middle is to allow the thermostat to see the bread. The bimetallic strip lives right between these two heating coils, and it's shielded from their heat output by these little wings. When it's toasting, the bimetallic strip isn't warmed significantly by the heating elements. Instead, it's warmed mainly by the heat radiating from the bread itself. This means that, effectively, it measures the surface temperature of the bread in order to determine how done it is. That's where the toaster gets its name, radiant control. By pointing the thermostat at the bread, it's able to consistently trip at the same relative darkness, pretty much regardless of how hot the toaster itself is. The reason why the toaster barely ran when I started a toast cycle with the pen was that without bread in it, radiation from the center elements can travel straight into the thermostat's eye. It is shielded at the start of a toast cycle by this little plate, which falls as the bread does, but once it's exposed to the heat coming from the middle elements, it will quickly trip and stop the toast cycle. Okay, so we know why the side elements are made from two coils, so the thermostat's eye can sit between them. But why then isn't the center element the same? Why is it made of this thin wire? Well, that wire, believe it or not, is what lowers the bread into the toaster. The entire mechanism is based around the thermal expansion properties of the nichrome wire heating element. To better understand this, we need to take this apart, and through the magic of buying two of them, I have an already taken apart one right here. With the rather ugly innards exposed, one of the first things you'll notice is this wild series of levers and linkages. These two arms form a third-class lever and connect to the bread lifters through a linkage on the right-hand side. The fulcrum of the lever is at the extreme left. When the toaster is engaged, the arms swing downward and thus bring the bread into the toasting position. It's a little hard to see what makes them fall, but watch closely. The force in our third-class lever is applied right here, and due to the nature of third-class levers, the amount of motion imparted by the force is greatly multiplied. However, the strength of the force is greatly reduced. This doesn't much matter though, as we're just lifting a couple slices of bread. The force on our third-class lever is itself derived from the action of this first-class lever, with the fulcrum here in the center, and the input force coming from right here. Now here's where things get pretty clever. Mind-blowingly clever, if I do say so myself. The input side of that lever is connected to this crossbar, which is connected via a set screw to the central core of the toaster. It's a little hard to see, and I'd rather not remove it for fear of breaking the toaster, so here's the image from the patent application. The part we want to focus on is here. The nichrome wire is wrapped many times around two vertical structures which are attached to each other via these flexible linkages at the top and bottom. The nichrome wire is wrapped quite tightly, so this entire thing is under tension. The squeezing force causes the two sides to be pulled closer together, which flexes the top and bottom pieces and slightly increases the central core's overall vertical length. This is how the toaster sits in its resting state. When a piece of bread is inserted, the force of the bread falling on the trip lever flexes the bimetallic strip via this linkage and engages the switch contacts. With power flowing through the heating wire, it rapidly heats up, which causes it to expand ever so slightly. Being a wire, the effect is that it becomes slightly longer, which in turn relaxes the squeezing force on the center core and causes it to get just a little bit shorter. That shortening of the central core structure pulls up on the crossbar at the bottom of the toaster, which causes this lever to actuate, which in turn lowers this piece ever so slightly, and thanks to the multiplication of movement in our third-class lever, causes the bread carriage to drop a dramatic amount. Once the thermostat trips and shuts power off to the toaster, the nichrome wire will begin to cool. As it does, it gets slightly shorter, which squeezes the sides of the core together, which pushes on the bottom, which pulls this side of the lever down, which pushes up on the third-class lever, which pushes up on the bread carriage itself, causing it to return to the top. Isn't that just so neat? The design of this toaster used the physical properties of the heating element itself to provide the motive force that makes the toaster automatic beyond belief. Even though the wire relaxes just a teeny tiny bit, the resulting movement is harnessed, amplified, and directed so effectively that it revolutionized the way toasters work. And its almost accidental perfectness just makes the whole thing more awesome. Because the nichrome wire has such a small thermal mass, it almost immediately relaxes when the bread is inserted, quickly dropping the bread into the toasting position. And when the power is switched off, it doesn't take long for it to cool and squeeze in again, pushing the toast back up. It just works! A component that needs to be in the toaster anyway turned out to be the perfect motor for automated bread lifting. While this toaster sure is a pleasure to use compared to any toaster you can buy in stores today, it does have some design weaknesses. Not many though, and we can fix the worst of them. Let's talk about its circuitry, and you'll see what needs to be addressed. Obviously, the circuitry in here is very simple. In fact, it's almost unfair to call it circuitry. This leaf switch right here is the only component controlling the toaster. When the bread sensing lever is pushed down by, I don't know, bread, this little helper pushes on the bimetallic strip inside the toaster, and once it flexes, it allows these contacts to touch, completing the circuit. The switch latches in place, and what releases it, of course, is the action of the bimetallic strip. As it heats up, it deforms to an increasingly greater extent. Once it's deformed enough, it snaps back into its original position, and the two contacts are pushed apart with a click. The toaster is then shut off, and the bread is returned to the top. The darkness control simply moves a little peg that presses on the bimetallic strip. This increases or decreases the amount of deformation in the strip that is required before it snaps back and breaks the circuit, which in turn changes the temperature at which the contacts will open. Cleverly, the switch actuator can't engage the switch again until the toast is removed, thanks to this little swinging cup thing.